Hey everybody, Evil Genius here, Eddie Villalba. Really super excited to have this new series started. It's been a while since I've had my blog going, and I really want to start putting some more content out. And I couldn't find a better way to start with a cool series on this new product I had the pleasure of being a part of its launch. And I'll talk about that in a second, which is Anthos Bare Metal. For those of you who know me, back in September, I started a new role with Google Cloud, and I am now what they call a application modernization engineer, working in our solutions technology and partner team for North America. And part of my job is to really kind of work both with customers, work with product team, engineering folks, and work with our partners to really put together solutions and technical enablement and technical unblocking of very complex scenarios around our application modernization story within Google. And the basis of that, the pinning of that, is obviously Google GKE, and it's also Anthos, right, which is our kind of strategy to bring together under an umbrella management of this complicated platform, and be able to use all of those great things that we know and love in the Kubernetes ecosystem across all of our environments, right? And when I say all of our environments, as an enterprise, as a customer, where I want to place that platform to be able to manage. And that Anthos umbrella covers things under GKE and GCP, but it also covers things in other clouds. It covers on VMware. And now, as of December 2020, it also covers bare metal deployments. So what does bare metal mean to Anthos? Bare metal means that we worry about the operating system up. So it really just looks at, do you have the base minimum requirements for an operating system and the hardware that reports to that operating system? If it does, we will manage and deploy GKE, a GKE instance deployment into that environment, into that bare metal, configure it and manage it for you. And everything from there up on top is very similar to how you would manage a GKE instance in Anthos. Below that, it's up to you as the operator to determine how you want that configured. So technically, it could be a VM running on KVM or something of that nature, or OpenStack. But in this case, what we're going to be showing today is a big shout out to the Intel partner team with Google. We worked with a couple of folks there to help us build an architecture. We want to really show off like the minimum spec requirements that Anthos Bare Metal requires, and they got us kind of this idea of a package, and we acquired some Intel NUCs. So I have 5 Intel NUCs here. I think they're the Gen 10 Core i7s with about 32 gigs of RAM and 250 gigs of hard disk space. So bare minimum requirement to get going, right? Which is kind of cool. They're 12 core each, right? So it's actually not that bad. And when I tell you the footprint of this thing, I'll try to put a video or a picture embedded into the video in the spot here, but it's basically the size of a 2-liter, a little bit smaller than a 2-liter Coke bottle in terms of stacked up together. And that I think is pretty cool. And I think they're one like maybe 90 watts max on these, right? They're fanless. I don't hear anything going on. So really nice. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to boot them up, get them an operating system loaded on those guys, and then talk about specifically why I'm doing it a specific way, and what you should be thinking about as well as someone who would want to do this with Anthos Bare Metal. What are the things you should be thinking about and the considerations and why I'm doing it this way? When we first got these, they had some OS on there. They had 2004 desktop, I think, on it, and I was like, no, that's not going to work for me. I want to blow it away. I want to put first server OS lightweight, and then second, I also want to make sure that I don't have to work through manually all the prerequisites that the operating system needs before bare metal can be run on the box. So I kind of looked at, Pixie boot, do all these things, and boot from USB and get a bunch of little 2 gig USB sticks and have them there just there all the time. And I was like, no, let's think about what an enterprise would do, right? What is an enterprise going to run to manage that? And there's lots of software out there that integrates with your hardware environment with switches. Some of your vendors will already include that. They have some kind of like bare metal control plane and allow you to kind of do all that. But I wanted to kind of mimic that with these tiny little NUCs. I do believe Intel does have a series of their NUCs that do take the vPro technology, which allows you to do some remote management of these systems as well. But in this instance, these do not have that. These do not have the Intel vPro or AMT technology, so I don't have the access to do that. So what I decided to do was kind of lay up what the infrastructure looks like. I have the 5 NUCs connected to a little 8-port switch. That 8-port switch is connected to my Edge X router, which is uplinked to my Wi-Fi router to the internet. Right? I have a laptop with Ubuntu 20.10, I think it is, desktop. That's going to be my central management station. That's where I have something called MAZ installed. I'll talk about that in a second. And it's also my where I will be doing my bare metal control, my BMCTL or my bare metal CLI from, and kind of everything else, right? Central management. That's also on the same switch as the NUCs right now. So everything is kind of both layer 2 and layer 3. The NUCs themselves, I'm going to boot into NetBoot, and they'll Pixie boot. The Ubuntu box, as I mentioned, has something called MAZ on it. MAZ is a product I found kind of, serendipitously through looking for or downloading the Ubuntu 20.04 server image. It asked the Ubuntu website says, here's how you can deploy Ubuntu server. And it gave you like 3 options. And one of them was MAZ. And I was like, what is MAZ? Started looking up some research. And I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. Maybe I can use that. And I did. So I downloaded it. It's really easy. It's 2 commands, 2 snaps, and then it's actually 3 commands. A snap install of the MAZ, the test database, which is PostgreSQL, and the admin, basically the setup of it, the admin's setup of it. After that, was completely loaded, and then just work from there through the documentation. It was really cool. So basically, it's a Pixie server. It's a web interface, and also allows me to kind of manage these nodes as like a data center almost, which is kind of cool. It also later on, if I add more nodes, I'm actually going to turn these nodes into KVM servers, so then I can kind of get a little bit more. I'm going to buy some more RAM for these and turn it into KVM servers, so I can add more nodes, and then I can manage the KVM and deployment of the VMs onto the KVM through MAZ on these boxes as well at a later date, which is really cool. I will also, one of the things I was kind of fighting with was, again, back to the prerequisites, right? I could do one of 2 things. I can either boot the operating system and then do some like minimal scripting at the end to run like a shell script to just get some of those prerequisites done. I can then use something like Ansible or Chef or Puppet to do my configuration management. But then I was like, you know what? I really want this to be a one-step thing, not have to manage too many things. So then I thought about Cloud Init, and I looked up Cloud Init, did a little bit of working on deeper. I played around with Cloud Init before, obviously working in multiple cloud providers before when I worked with Azure and now with Google. I'm not new to it, but I wanted to kind of get, how do I do that with bare metal, and what are the modules don't work, and how do I get the metadata and all that stuff. So MAZ lets me go ahead and throw in a Cloud Init script into the deployment, and then I can make sure if I write the script well, I can meet all my prereqs right away. So what are the prereqs? Let's talk about those real quick. One is if we go to the documentation here, I just want to kind of show you where to look for those. The first is the hardware or the operating system, right? So let's look at the hardware requirements. The hardware requirements are pretty simple. They're not too bad, but the minimum, which is basically almost what we're running here, but minimum is 4-core, RAM is 32 gigs, and storage is 128. So literally minimum of 2 machines and 4 core total. But I say, obviously that's not recommended, and you're going to have some struggles, but 8 core is recommended. I'm running 12 core on each box, which is kind of cool. So I have, a total of like 60 cores here. RAM, 32 gigs of RAM, and recommended storage is 128 gigs, or recommended 256. So again, really not, it's kind of small. It's not Raspberry Pi, but it's pretty small. And then operating system wise, you have a choice between CentOS. I know all the bad news about CentOS. Let's not go there. RHEL or Ubuntu. With Ubuntu, which is the one I'm using, there are some requirements. Some of them are going to be some eye-raising requirements, and I'll talk a little bit about those in my next episode. But right now, I just want to talk about what those are and how to set it up. Disabling AppArmor, which is the kind of like the security setup and application security setup within Ubuntu, and then also disabling the firewall. I know, right? I know everyone's like, what are you talking about? And then installing Docker on the workstation and making sure it's at least Docker 1903 and verifying that it's working, right? The other requirements are kind of like hidden. They're not really hidden, but they're under the installation prerequisites. One of them is from the machine that you're going to run the bare metal CLI or BMCTL command, that obviously there's an SSH key pre-provisioned or a public key pre-provisioned, and I can SSH into the nodes from that admin workstation, the control station, I'll call it. I need to be able to SSH into all of the nodes that will be part of the bare metal cluster. Okay. And without password, it has to be a key. And I also, that's there, and I don't, again, it's kind of hidden in some of the documentation as not, it's under the workstation prerequisites, is access to all cluster node machines through SSH via private keys with passwordless root access, right? So basically what we're talking about is passwordless sudo, right? I have to be able to type sudo, whatever, and not be queried for a password. So that requires me to configure the operating system and some of its configuration a specific way. And what I've done is I've put together a little Cloud Init script that does that for me. And it creates a Docker group, creates a Docker service account, adds it to the group, creates my account that I want to use. It pre-populates it with one of my public keys for the workstation into that account. It gives it passwordless sudo, and then it gives me the bash shell. Install some packages, and then do some work on the SSH server config. Install Docker, and then disable AppArmor. I'll add the line for disable UFW in a minute, and then do a reboot at the end of all of this, right? So this is basically what my Cloud Init looks like. So how does it look to deploy a node with MAZ? It's really simple. The first time you boot up the nodes, it brings them under like I'm aware of the node exists, but it doesn't really deploy anything to it. It just gathers the information about it. So that's already here, and then I can acquire it, and then from there, now once it's allocated, I can now then choose deployment from it. So now I can go ahead and say I want to deploy something to it. So I'm going to go ahead and hit deploy. I'm going to choose the operating system. It does have a catalog of images you can download. I think Ubuntu and CentOS are the two main ones. But you can create like a local mirror and add whatever you want. But this is out of the box kind of set up here. As I mentioned, I can make this a MAZ KVM host management server. So I can make that node a KVM host. It'll take care of all that stuff. And then I can deploy VMs through MAZ on those hosts and kind of make like my own little mini data center. Really cool. I haven't done that yet, but I think I'm going to at some point. And then this is the Cloud Init user data. So now I'm just going to select that. I'm going to paste in my script right here. I'm going to add my disable UFW. So now I will disable the firewall, and I will hit start deployment of the machine. Okay, so now it's kind of sitting there waiting in this deployment state and saying, okay, let me know when you want me to start deploying. And I have to boot my node again into the cluster. So I'm going to pause this for 1 second so I can get that over there. Once I start that, you'll see an update here. I'll be right back and you'll see some updates there. All right, so we're going to go ahead and I just have to hit enter. And what you'll see in a minute is it'll say something like performing Pixie boot. And it gets an IP, then it will start deploying. You'll see where it says configuring operating system. You'll see the whole process. It doesn't take too long, actually. It's not bad. I think last time I timed it was about 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes to get everything running. It does reboot a few times because at the end of the first operating system laydown, it does a reboot, and then it runs my Cloud Init user data stuff, and I added that reboot in there. I don't have to, but I think I like that because sometimes you do a certain command, especially if you're doing like run CMD stuff, where the command does something but it didn't actually take place until you recycle something or server. So I just, as a double check, I always make sure and reboot. So there it's loading. So it kind of gives you like stages of everything that's happening, which is kind of neat. And what'll happen is as soon as this is done, it'll move down into the deployed state, and then it will be part of that deployed cluster group. Okay. So while that's happening, I do want to talk about what the next episodes of the series are going to be and kind of the things to look out for. So episode 2 will focus a little bit more on the prerequisites specifically. We'll also talk about the different deployment models that are available in Anthos Bare Metal, and we'll talk about what the benefits are and the side effects of each one of those and what you might have to do. We'll talk about, we'll look a little bit more in depth into the BMCTL command, the pre-flight process, what the configuration file looks like, why we've chosen to kind of follow the Kubernetes Resource Manager model to do all of that, and also what services are required on the Google side in terms of what services you have to enable, IAM roles. Also, what is the GKE Connect agent actually doing? What's that process and what is it doing in the security of it? I'm going to have a friend of mine, a peer of mine, and actually a great friend of mine, Nick Eberts, is going to be joining me on the next video series. So it'll be more of a little bit of a dialogue, which is kind of cool. And Nick, I've known Nick for probably 5 or 6 years. He's a customer engineer out of Georgia, out of Atlanta. And he is just really been kind of like my sounding board for a lot of crazy ideas I've had around the Kubernetes and cloud native stuff. And we've hacked on a lot of stuff together, and so glad to be working with him again. And we're going to kind of go over all of those things and what we see customers doing right, what we see customers doing wrong in our minds in terms of, thinking about cloud native, thinking about multi-cloud or on-premise cloud and extending, and where we see that this is a right fit or potentially a wrong fit. And we'll kind of run through those kind of scenarios kind of as just a discussion kind of talk, right, which we normally do. Again, I want to keep it down to like 30 minutes, but at the end of, while we're talking and everything's deploying, by the end of the session, you'll see that we'll have a cluster up and running with some masters, some control nodes, some worker nodes, and we should be able to kubectl into that cluster and deploy stuff if we need to. We'll talk about load balancing and how that works in ABM and all the other cool stuff and architectures that we've seen in the wild. I like to call it the wild with customers, and we'll go from there. As you can see, the node's rebooting now. I think that's probably, looking at my timing, that's probably the second reboot. So we should be close to saying deployed in a minute, but we'll kind of watch it from there. But otherwise, this is supposed to be, hopefully, if you have any questions or concerns, I would like this to be kind of dialogue-ish, if as much as possible that the internet can do. So if you're watching this from my YouTube channel, please add comments down below, and I will try to get back to those and kind of get a thread. And I will also post into some show notes here any links to documentation on MAZ, documentation on Anthos Bare Metal, and also if you're interested and want to hack around and help me with my cloud init, you can definitely, I'll put the link to my snippet there on GitLab, so it's public. Then you can hack away at that if you'd like. And if you are reading this through my Medium blog, evil with 2 L's, of course, genius.medium.com, I'll have those linked as well there, and the video will be embedded. Excuse me. So, it's cold here in Austin right now, and I got the heat going, and I got a little bit of allergies. So I should have now, there it is, deployed. So what I'm going to do here, I'm on my Mac, videotaping this from my Mac, and recording all this through the Mac, and then I'm going to SSH into my Ubuntu master control box. So there's my master control box, my Ubuntu box, and that's where my SSH key is. The reason I'm doing that is because my SSH key that I embedded is that one. And I'm going to then try to SSH into that node. So ABM admin is the account I created, and 172.16.20.3 is the IP. Let's see if that works. It might be like booting right now. Give it a second. Excuse me. There we go. And we are in. Okay, so let's just verify that all the prereqs are done. So one more time, if I need to make sure that I was able to SSH in with my key. So that's 1. 2. Let's do 2 and 3 together. I'm going to do a sudo docker ps. So that should tell me, sudo docker ps. That should tell me that I have passwordless sudo and Docker is running on the box. So there you go. That's 3 prerequisites down. And then we'll do sudo system ctl status AppArmor and UFW. So AppArmor, you can see it says inactive, and UFW, the uncomplicated firewall, is inactive. So we've met all the prereqs. This machine is ready to go for me to start my BMCTL install. And then that's where I'll pick up with Nick on the next episode. Thanks again for joining me. I look forward to any conversations that we may have through the comments section. So please definitely comment down below, and or in my Medium blog post also down towards the bottom. Please comment or clap, and we'll go through the next episode hopefully within a week, and get more information as we go along. Hope you learned something, and looking forward to you. Stay safe out there. See you later.